Great. So first of all, quick disclaimer. Information we share with you today is based on the current guidelines, and guidelines might change. And your situation may be different from our understanding. So please keep this in mind while following this session today. And looking at the next slide, today's overview is that first, we will discuss filing taxes as a freelancer. What happens if you have customers outside of Japan? What happens based on your resident status? Then we will talk about the white and blue systems, difference between them, requirements, benefits, and your tax questions. Thirdly, you submitted questions to us before this session. We went over them, we prepared our answers. And then finally, any follow-up questions you might have. So this is what the session is going to look like today. And it will take about 40 to 50 minutes in total, including the follow-up questions. Now, looking at the next slide, as a freelancer, you may have customers outside of Japan. You may even travel abroad to your customer, do the work on site, and come back to Japan. How do these situations affect your taxes? Is there any difference between them? Well, it depends on your resident status for tax purposes. And keep in mind, this is different from your immigration status. There are three categories. The first one, most comprehensive one, is permanent resident, where your worldwide income is reported on your Japanese tax return. The next category is non-permanent resident. It's a little bit more limited, where only your domestic income and money transfers into Japan are reported on your Japanese tax return. And then finally, the most limited category is non-resident, where only domestic income is reported on your tax return. Now, when we say domestic income, the image might be, well, my customers in Japan, that's probably domestic income. But if I have customers outside of Japan, that's maybe not domestic income. Well, it doesn't depend on your customers. It depends on your location. So here's how this works. If you conducted the work while in Japan, it is considered domestic income. On the other hand, if you travel to, let's say, Germany, and you do the work there, you do the work for your customer on site and come back, that's not domestic income. So that part of your income doesn't have to be on your Japanese tax return. If your resident status for tax purposes is something like a non-permanent or non-resident. So please keep this in mind. And also, where the money goes is not a concern either. So your customer may be paying to your bank account in Germany, let's say, or maybe paying to your bank account in Japan. That doesn't make a difference. What matters is your location. If you did the work while you were in Japan, that's domestic income, regardless of where the money goes. So these are the three categories, but then how do we find out resident status for tax purposes? Because like we mentioned, it's different from immigration status. So while we were saying, well, this income is domestic, this income is not domestic, and if you're non-permanent resident, you only should report domestic income. How do we find out our status? Let's start from the non-resident category on the right-hand side. If you move to Japan during the year, let's say we are going to file 2023 taxes in about a month or so. In 2023, you move to Japan and you're not Japanese citizen, then you are probably in the non-resident category where only domestic income should be on your tax return. The next category, non-permanent resident, probably most people here live the whole year in Japan in 2023. In that case, there's a follow-up question. If you lived in Japan for less than 5 years in the last 10 years and you're not a Japanese citizen, then you're most likely a non-permanent resident for tax purposes. But if you lived here for more than 5 years in the last 10 years, then you're most likely a permanent resident. So please keep this in mind when you're filing your tax return, because it determines what part of your income should be on the tax return. And we actually received a specific question about this for the session. The question was, well, I'm a Japanese citizen, but I left Japan. I didn't live the whole 2023 in Japan. where does that lead me? Well, if you left Japan and let's say you move to Germany and you have a permanent arrangement there where, let's say, visa for more than a year, that makes you non-resident in Japan. So if you didn't have any income in Japan, there's no need to file a tax return. Because this resident status is such an important point, we ask this as the first question on our online tax interview, because it's as an important starting point, and it looks like this. We condense the rules into 4 boxes. You select all that apply. So for example, I'm not a Japanese citizen. I didn't select the box, but I lived the entire year in Japan. And then I lived here for more than 5 years. So that makes me permanent resident for tax purposes, even though I may not necessarily have permanent residency card, because that's for immigration and this is for tax purposes. So this is the resident status. Moving on to the next slide, white and blue systems. Now, let's go over them to find out which one is a better option for you, because we have these 2 options for freelancers. We have a quick question about resident status. I want to take it before we move on to white and blue systems. Is Japanese citizen and permanent resident different in this case? No, permanent resident category is the most comprehensive one, and it can include Japanese citizens. It can include non-Japanese citizens. Either or can be in that category. So white and blue systems, these are the options for freelancers, by the way. So for example, if you have salary income, you cannot really choose between these 2 options or any of these options for your salary income. It's only for freelance income and real estate income. The white system is default for everyone. So you don't need to do any additional application. There are no additional requirements, no additional benefits either. So if you file your taxes, just normally reporting freelance income on your tax return, you're most likely using the white system. The blue system, on the other hand, requires application in advance. And there are benefits, there are requirements. The benefit is you get an additional deduction. And the amount of deduction depends on your bookkeeping. On your application where you say, well, I want to file my taxes as blue return filer, you also select the bookkeeping type you're following. And based on your selection, your deduction amount is determined. But the tax office says, that's great. Here's your additional benefit. Here's your additional deduction. But in return, we want a monthly breakdown of your income tax, of your income during the tax filing. So for example, if your income was 5 million yen, on the white system, you can just put 5 million yen. And that's all we would need. But for the blue system, we would need a monthly breakdown, 12-month breakdown of that 5 million yen income. So that would be the difference between the 2 systems. There's a benefit, but there's a requirement as well. Now, how do you choose whether you want to use white or blue systems during tax filing? Or how do you apply for blue system? First of all, you can always visit the tax office. You can make the application there and say, I want to use the blue system going forward. But when you file taxes with us, we also ask you, are you a blue return tax filer? And if you say yes, then we change our questions based on that with the 12-month income breakdown. And if you say apply for me, then we prepare the application for you and attach it to your tax return and then submit it to the tax office for you. And then after that current tax filing, you can start using blue tax return system for your future tax filings. So what information is needed to file taxes? This is a question we hear all the time. I'm a freelancer. What information do you need from me? Or if I file at the tax office, what information do they need from me? First of all, your income amount is needed as a freelancer. Let's just say 5 million yen. There are no documents necessary, so any invoices, they're not necessary. But if any of the payers withheld taxes from your payments, So they pay taxes on behalf of you in advance. You can include those amounts on your tax return. And if you have the copies of those invoices, it would just help accuracy, but it's not a requirement. So only the amount is fine. The next big piece is your business-related expenses. There are categories specified by the tax office. There are about 8 to 10 categories, such as travel, office supplies, home office. Again, we don't need individual receipts for every single expense. We also don't need item by item. For example, today I spent this much on travel. Next day I spent this much on communication, but just total amounts for the year are all we need for your business-related expenses. And any fees you pay us are completely tax deductible as well. You can just include them as part of your business-related expenses. Now, some people have multiple incomes. So let's say I'm a freelancer, but I also have salary income, or I have some other side income. Your final tax return is a collection of all your different income types. So if you have salary, we would ask for a copy of your Gensen. That would include your salary amount. That would include your the taxes you already paid. So when we have a copy of the Gensen, we carry over everything to your tax return. And then when you choose, I have self-employment income, then we would ask you, okay, how much is your self-employment income? How much are your expenses? So we would carry everything to your final tax return as the collection of all your income for that year. Documents are not necessary. Just the numbers are enough. But if you have any documents, if you'd like to check with us, we're more than happy to take a look and help. Now, these are the two main topics we wanted to discuss today. We also received a lot of questions about the new invoice system. New invoice system, consumption taxes, that's a big topic. And last month, we actually allocated the whole session to this new invoice topic. So if Ayana can paste the summary article we prepared on the comments section, please take a look at it. There's also a video of the previous session. I think it will answer most of your questions. It will answer who needs to apply, what it means to apply, how to apply, whether it affects your situation. So please take a look. If you still have questions, more than happy to help. A couple of questions in the comment section. I just want to take a look at them quickly. Regarding real estate income, does it matter if it's income in another country such as UK? If you're a permanent resident category in that resident status for tax purposes, it doesn't matter because worldwide income should be reported. But if you're in non-permanent resident category, the real estate income is not a domestic income, so it doesn't have to be on your tax return. And Matt says, investment income is only money withdrawn. Yes, you are taxed on distributions, just quite generally. So on to your tax questions. There were, what we did was, there were many questions, but we pulled them together into two themes, basically. One is deductible expenses and the other is dependents. And there were some more questions, more like standalone questions. So to start with deductible expenses, do we need to provide documents for home office expense? So the way home office expense works is we ask for your annual rent. And we your home, typically it really as your home of whatever percent you can provide documentation and you can provide proof. But initially,
I think we lost a little bit of the audio because you were glitching out.
Okay, I should repeat this this last question.
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. So do we need to provide documents for home office expenses? No documents are necessary, but whatever you report, make sure to have some sort of documentation, some sort of proof in your records in case the tax office inquires in the future. And the way home office works is that we ask for your annual rent, and we also ask for percentage of your home you used as your home office. And that's up to you. It's typically between 10% and 50%. But whatever you assign, make sure it's a reasonable portion. But other than that, no documents are necessary. Why are office lunch and coffee meeting expenses not tax deductible? Well, they are tax deductible as long as they are for your customers or with your customers. But if they're not with your customers or for your customers, for example, it's for your personal lunch, that's not really business related expense. It's more about your survival, personal survival. So that wouldn't be tax deductible. Subject to certain limits, there are no, for individual taxes, there are no exact monetary limits, but proportionally speaking, if you're, let's just say, all your other business expenses are here at, let's say, 10,000 yen or 100,000 yen, but your entertainment expenses are much higher, that might cause a red flag at the tax office, and it might cause inquiry. So that's what subject to certain limit means. So make sure whatever you're reporting is reasonable and it makes sense and it doesn't cause a red flag. Proportionally speaking, the rest of your tax filing. Moving on, is a laptop tax deductible? Yes, as long as it's for your business, but depreciation is necessary. And what that means is for items that you use for more than a year and they cost more than 100,000 yen, we need to spread out the cost throughout a certain number of years. And the number of years depends on the item. Laptops are, I believe, 4 years. We determine that for you, so you just have to enter whatever the item. It can be a car, it can be a laptop, it can be your office furniture. But if it's more than 100,000 yen and it's something you use for more than a year, we spread out the cost. But as long as it's for your business, you can deduct it as a business related expense. And finally, for deductible expenses, we have this question. Does my income as freelancer determine my national pension and healthcare premiums? National pension is fixed amount for everybody, but healthcare premiums do change every year based on your income. So if your income increases, expect higher healthcare premiums as well. This question is in deductible expenses section, but it's not really a business related expense. It's a deduction, but still it's something that's taken out of your income and it helps you reduce your taxes. So this is I believe this is all for deductible expenses. I'll just take a look at the comments section real quick, see if you have any questions about deductible expenses. Healthcare can get expensive. The cap is quite high. It can get quite expensive, but the good thing is it is in relation to your income. It's not fixed. So if you're having a good year, that's amazing, but premiums will probably increase too. Can you opt out of pension? Our specialty is taxes. So I wouldn't be able to give you a professional answer about this because pension is a little bit different area from taxes. So moving on to the next question, from a tax standpoint, is there a particular benefit to operating as a freelancer, contract worker, full-time employee, or self-employed business owner? So there's a lot of terminology here, and it's very easy to get lost. But there are really two categories we have to look for: business income on one hand and salary income on the other hand. Salary income, if you're a full-time employee or a contract employee, it'll be business income if you're operating as a freelancer, self-employed, or independent contractor. And it ultimately depends on your contract. So with one party, you may be earning salary income as a contract employee, and they will give you a Gensen at the end of the year. And on your tax return, that will be recorded as salary income. With another company, they may be working with you as independent contractor, and that income will be recorded as business income on your tax return. So these are the two main categories, and it really depends on the contract, on your relationship with the party. And it's perfectly normal to have both at the same time. But how does the tax treatment change? Is one better over the other? When we look at business income, again, let's just use the 5 million yen example. So we have 5 million yen business income, and then we will deduct your business related expenses, whatever you have. Some people have 500,000 yen, some people have 2 million yen, completely depends on you. And then standard deduction, 480,000 yen, which is the same for everybody. So that's how we find your taxable income. And then the tax rates are same for everybody depending on the amount. There's no difference between business income and salary for percentages, tax rates. But for salary, let's say 5 million salary, then the deduction is called salary deduction, and that's based on a table. So you cannot decide on your own, and you cannot deduct related expenses from your salary. So it's a little bit of limited freedom there. And then minus standard deduction, 480,000 yen for everybody. And that's how we find your taxable income. This is the table. This is what it looks like. So if your salary is, let's say, between 3.6 and 6.6 million yen, then your standard deduction will be 20% of your salary plus 440,000 yen. Now, let's compare with real numbers and see how the taxable income plays out. In both cases, we have 5 million yen, salary income and business income. Salary income after the deduction, based on the table that we showed you earlier, it will be 3.5 million yen, sort of like net salary, and then minus standard deduction, your taxable income will be 3,080,000 yen. If this was business income, 5 million yen, well, like we said, deduction depends on your expenses. Let's just say you have 1 million yen expenses. So it'll be 4 million yen after expenses, that'll be your net income. After standard deduction, your taxable income will be 3.5 million yen. So in this situation, it looks like we have higher taxable income for business income compared to salary. But again, it really depends on how much you're deducting as business related expense. And there's more freedom with business income. But there are cases where, well, my business related expenses are very limited. They're not necessarily 1 million, 2 million yen for a 5 million income. In that case, the deduction will be low. But with salary income, you don't have to worry about it because it's a set deduction. Now, the next main theme is dependence. But Matt has a question about expenses. I just want to address this question quickly. On a business trip, can that include flights, accommodation, all food, etc.? Is it all that can be deductible? Flights and accommodation, they can be deducted. Flights will be travel. Accommodation can be travel as well. Food, again, it can be deducted as long as it's for your customers or with your customers. If it's your breakfast on your own, that's not a business-related expense. It's a personal expense. But other than that, they are tax deductible. So moving on to dependents. I believe we have a few more questions and then we're almost done. After that, I will try to address your follow-up questions. Do I get money back if I have dependents? You can claim dependents on your tax return for additional deduction, but there are rules. they have to be a relative. They have to have net income under 480,000 yen, and they have to be financially supported by you. So as long as they fit in these three criteria, you can claim dependents. And there are required documents. For example, if your dependents are outside of Japan, then the tax office will most likely say, well, provide supporting documents where you show this person is actually a relative of yours and you have been financially supporting them. So this can be something like a bank statement. And to prove that they're a relative, it can be something like a family register. But the answer is it's perfectly fine to claim dependents as long as they fit in these criteria. Does a relative include sister-in-law or brother-in-law? Sunny, could you go back to the previous slide? So blood relatives within 6th degree and relatives within 3rd degree. I believe it does, but if Yamaguchi can confirm this, it would be great. Yamaguchi, whenever you know the answer, you can put in the comment section if you want. But within 6th degree and relatives within 3rd degree, and brother-in-law, sister-in-law, I believe it is 2nd or 3rd degree. So it should be included, but we'll hear from Yamaguchi shortly. Next question. When claiming kids as dependents, should we include on the wife's or husband's tax return if filed separately and we're both freelancers? You can claim kids as dependents on both tax returns, but just know that on the US side, they need to have a social security number. And if you're filing Japanese taxes, both you and your wife, then it would probably make more sense to include kids on the tax return that has higher income, because that tax return will probably have a higher tax balance. So it'll be a good option to add that additional deduction on that tax return. But you cannot deduct kids on both of your Japanese tax returns. You'll have to choose one. Moving on. I want to start a small business, but I don't know what I would need to do to keep everything above board and properly track expenses. What to do? Well, we recommend you record your transactions. Probably an Excel file should be easy to manage. And another recommendation is that if you have a dedicated bank account or a credit card or a cash card, it would make it much easier to track your expenses, because if they're combined with your personal expenses, then you have to go over your statements every single month and maybe it's hard to remember. But if it's a dedicated account, dedicated credit card, it will make it much easier. And just like I explained before, for your expenses, only the total amounts for any category that applies to you are needed. So as long as you know the numbers, as long as you keep track of them in such a manner where they're dedicated accounts, that should help you keep everything above board and properly track expenses. Moving on. Is there a taxable range for crypto or stock gains? Crypto and stock gains are different categories of income on the tax return. Crypto is miscellaneous income, where it's part of your general income. And the tax rate is going to be based on your total income. So it's added on top of your salary, added on top of your freelance. We find your total income, and that based on your tax bracket, you'll be assigned a tax percentage. Stock gains, on the other hand, it's a fixed rate, 20.31%. So it doesn't matter how much salary you have. It doesn't matter how much freelance income you have. Your stock gains will be taxed at a fixed rate, and there's no minimum limit. My small business group frequently asks, at what point should they shift from freelance to incorporating? So I'm a freelancer at the moment. Should I change to incorporating? Should I start a company? When does it make sense? Well, just know that, first of all, starting a company means additional administrative work. because you're creating a separate entity from your person. That means in addition to your individual income tax filing, now there is tax filing for that entity. There's bookkeeping for that entity. So that's additional administrative work. But if it makes sense based on the taxes you're paying, it might be a good option. And the way to look at it is on corporate taxes, first 8 million yen is taxed around 25%. That's the effective tax rate that includes everything. After 8 million, effective tax rate is around 33%. Now, if you compare this to individual taxes, if you're earning 10 million yen as an individual, your effective tax rate is around 30%. So that means it probably makes sense to start considering this topic after your earnings reach 10 million yen. But before that, it will probably create additional admin work for you, and there's not much tangible benefit. Moving on. Okay, that was all the questions actually that you asked us beforehand. There were additional questions, but because time is limited, we are not able to answer everything, but we try to pull everything into certain themes and cover everything as much as possible. But if there's anything we haven't answered, couldn't answer, please just let us know in the comments section. I'll go over this section right now. Would it be okay to have my wife claim the kids on her tax filing and me claim them on my US filing? Yes, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. But again, on the US side, just make sure the kids have social security numbers, because that's only when you're allowed to get child tax credit. As a freelancer, do I need to become a business proprietor? Laura, maybe you're talking about this self-employment application to the tax office. That application is recommended. It is to notify the tax office of your freelance activity. So it's always a good idea to notify them, make sure their records are up to date. But becoming a business proprietor, I'm not sure if there's another meaning behind that. But once you have a freelance income, that's reported on your tax return, and there's no sort of additional categorization as a business proprietor. Let me know if that answered your question. Is taxes based on hours worked or when the money is paid? An example, get paid for December in January. So this is about whether it's cash basis or accrual basis. If Yamaguchi can answer that, it'll be great. Whatever, I think the answer is you can choose either method, but whatever method you choose, make sure it's consistent throughout all your payments and throughout years. But if Yamaguchi can confirm that, it'll be great. So I get paid, and I do the work in December, but I get paid in January.
Normally it should be accrual basis, so December.
Okay, so it should be December. Thank you very much. Maria asks, sorry, I missed the first 10 minutes. My question might have been covered earlier. Is a person on a student visa working part-time considered a freelancer? So with freelance income, there are really two options. If Sunny can go back to the slide where we show boxes in our system, I have freelance income, I have salary. I just want to show something there real quick. It'll be before the Q&A. Yeah, this one. So you can choose miscellaneous income or freelance income, but the difference between them, I think we're getting there soon. Okay. He will get there soon. The difference between freelance income and side income is that you should choose freelance income if you expect to do that job for a considerable period of time. It's not a temporary thing. So if it's like a side gig where you're saying, well, I'll work at this job for 3 months and then I'm not going to do it, then that's miscellaneous income. You're not necessarily considered a freelancer, but the income is added on your tax return. But if it's more a permanent sort of activity where, let's say you're a designer, you keep getting clients, that's self-employment income. There is no different tax rate for any of those. They're all added on your tax return. But if you're working part-time, if it's a temporary thing, it can be a miscellaneous income. But in either case, it should be on the tax return.
Maybe part-time means like she is hired from someone by someone, like a company. In that case, it should be salary income.
Right. So if your contract with that party, if it's based on a salary, let's say they're paying you a fixed amount and they're issuing you that salary payment slip, it will say this is a salary payment, and that should be reported as salary. So it depends on your relationship with that party as well, whether they're paying you as a salaried person or someone like an independent contractor, temporary thing. Are bills in your home also at 30%, electricity, etc.? Yes, it should be the same percentage, and they're not all deducted because it's your home and you only use part of it for your home office. I'm a permanent resident in Japan, but I spent 6 months in the US. Do I need to claim income I made in the US? If you're a permanent resident in this categorization we showed you, then your worldwide income should be on your tax return. So yes, the income you earn in US should be on the Japanese tax return as well. Laura says, I'm applying to renew my 1-year visa next year. Do you know if immigration cares about income before or after tax? We can't really say. I'm not sure if there's like a published guideline for this where this is the limit. If your business expenses are so high, it's not good. I'm not sure about that, Laura, because it's about immigration.
Yeah, that's a legal question. So we advise you to check with someone in the know in that realm.
Right. Matt says, if I have a contract with a client, but they're paid by the hour, what does this count as? Salary, hourly, contract worker, client is in America. So Matt, if you don't have employee relationship, if they're in the US, for example, if they're not issuing you a W-2, that means it's not salary income. If they're issuing a 1099, for example, that makes you an independent contractor. So that will be reported as either freelance income or side income, but not salary. Yeah, 1099, it's issued to independent contractors at the end of the year, where it says, we made this much payment to Matt in this year. And when you're filing US taxes, that information is attached to your tax return. And we use that for your Japanese tax return as well. Ayana asks, if you get paid from another country, like the US, and they send it to your US account, and you transfer your money from US account to your own Japan account, does that mean it needs to be reported? Ayana, if you are working for that company while you're in Japan, that's considered domestic income for Japanese tax purposes, and it should be on your Japanese tax return. It's really, it's not a concern whether the money goes to your US account or Japan account. And by the way, a lot of people also ask about the exchange rate. There are people who use average exchange rate for the year when they're converting from dollars to yen. But the guideline from the tax office is that you should use the exchange rate based on the day of the transaction instead of the average exchange rate, because it goes up and down and it changes, and based on the guideline, that's going to be a more accurate reporting when you're converting from dollars to yen. Watikum says, I only work 24 hours a week and I'm considered part-time, but my company agreed to sponsor. So I don't have all the benefits that full-time staff have. How will my taxes be calculated? And can I claim my dependents whom I send money to monthly? You can claim dependents regardless of your income type. You can have salary, you can have side income, you can have freelance income. You can claim dependents in any of these cases, as long as they fit those three criteria, these ones. But in terms of how your taxes will be calculated, if they're paying you salary, then your salary will be reported minus the salary deduction that we showed the table earlier, minus standard deduction, and that's your net taxable income. Laura asks, do you pay all taxes around the same time, such as pension, residence tax, etc.? Laura, pension is paid monthly. National income tax is paid upon your tax filing. The deadline is March 15. But if you're paying through your bank account, I believe they take money out automatically in April 21st. And residence tax, your ward office sends you a letter in the mail with the payment slips if you're a freelancer, if you're not paying through your company. And those are separated into several months, starting from typically June, but they're also separated into months. So not all of them are at the same time. Matt asked, well, what happens if my client doesn't get me a 1099? They didn't do that last year. I assumed that was just hourly rate, which I refer as prefecture tax doesn't apply to hourly rates. The prefecture tax office told me this. So if they're not issuing you a 1099 and also not a W-2, Matt, it most likely means you're not a salaried employee there. That means the income shouldn't be reported as salary on your Japanese tax return. And again, hourly rate or weekly rate, that's not much of a concern, but whether they pay you as independent contractor is a concern here. So it sounds like this income is most likely a miscellaneous income or freelance income. In both cases, tax calculation is the same. But I can't answer about prefecture taxes. They differ from one prefecture to another. What happens is when you file your national taxes based on the guidelines, that's sent to the tax office, and the tax office shares this with your local ward office. And that's when they calculate your local taxes based on the national tax. So you don't have to do a separate prefecture tax filing. Following with Anna's question, just to be sure, if you work as a freelancer from Japan, but for a US company, paid to your US account, it is considered domestic income for Japan and has to be reported. And Chiniera adds, if I pay Japanese taxes on that money, can I exclude it from my US taxes? Okay, so you work for a US company in Japan. Because you work in Japan, yes, that's domestic income. And money can go to your US account, your account in Germany, your account in Japan, doesn't matter. Because you're working while in Japan, that's domestic income. And to answer Chiniera's question, the income should be reported on your Japanese tax return as well as US tax return. But when we do both tax filings, what we do is, because you live in Japan, we file your Japanese taxes first. And then we carry everything over to your US tax return and say, for example, here is Chiniera's income, but also here are the taxes she paid on her Japanese tax return. So we are reporting, but we are also reporting the taxes that you paid. But for self-employed people, the foreign tax credit or foreign earned income exclusion, they're not exactly one-to-one. So there might be an additional tax balance on the US side, and that's self-employment taxes. That money goes to Social Security, so it's not covered by foreign tax credit. If you don't want to pay for that, what you can do is you can get an exemption document from the pension office, Japanese pension office. We attach that to your US tax return and say, Shinyere paid all her income taxes in Japan, so please remove her US income taxes. And also she's covered under the Japanese Social Security system. So please take out her US Social Security tax payments as well. So that makes that most likely ensures your tax balance is zero, but you're reporting in both places. Let's take a few more questions and then we'll wrap up the session. Matt asks, do we have to say how many taxes, pension, health insurance we paid for this year as well? Or is this all tracked on their side? No, you should report it. So when you're filing taxes, after the income section, there's the deduction section, and that's where you include your the pension amount you paid in 1 year, health insurance you paid in 1 year, and those are deducted from your taxes. So you should include that. They're not, well, they probably know how much you paid, but if they're not on the tax return that you're filing, then it won't be deducted from your taxes. So make sure to include them. Mario asks, so it's March 15, 2024 in 3 months, 4 months for income earned in the year 2023. That's right. So the year ends, and then we have 3 months to report that year. I have been paying consumption taxes for several years since I charged my clients 10%. Does the new invoice system affect me? I'm also making less than 10 million a year. If you're making less than 10 million a year, it probably doesn't affect you. And if your customers didn't ask for a qualified invoice, again, it probably doesn't affect you. But Simon, please take a look at the summary article. You will find answers in more detail. Because sometimes your clients may not be asking for it. You may be earning under 10 million, but it might make sense for you to apply to the new invoice system. So in order for you to make the best decision, I think it'll be a good idea to read that summary. And then if you have follow-up questions, happy to help. Matt says, taxes or deduction from taxes. That seems a little cyclical. No, pension and health insurance, they're social insurance payments. So they're not exactly taxes. They do go to different branches of government, but those payments are deductions from your taxes. And also you can always deduct advanced tax payments from your taxes. So that's always another possibility. So for example, if you paid your taxes in advance, sometimes the tax office does that to freelancers, where they say, we estimated your taxes for next year, please pay this bill. And when you file taxes, we include that amount on your tax return and say, here's Matt's income, here's Matt's deductions, this is a tax balance, let's say 100,000 yen, but Matt already paid 50,000 yen for this. So now he just has to pay the remaining 50,000. The filing season is going to start from January 1st. You can always file at the tax office or with us online at freedomtax.jp. To file with us, you just go to our website. On the homepage, it says get started or file your taxes. And we walk you through a series of quick questions. It typically takes 5 to 10 minutes to put all your numbers. And once you put your numbers, we prepare a draft of your tax return. We share it with you. We can go over together with you and then explain whatever is going on your tax return. So if you're confused about your tax balance, if you're confused about, I have this income, but is it salary? Is it side income? We help you with that. And then once you approve your draft, we file it for you. We submit it to the tax office. So the season is going to start from January 1st. Finally, I mentioned that our fee is tax deductible, but timing is important for that. So just like Maria asked, the 2023 taxes are going to be filed in 2024. So if you pay us, for example, in 2024, that's that year's expense. That's not 2023's expense anymore. So that means you have to wait for 1 year to be able to deduct that expense from your taxes. We made a new page. It's called Early Tax Review. This allows you two things. One is, if you're considering filing taxes with us, you can pay us before the year ends. So you can deduct that expense from the same year. And also, you can enter any estimates you have about this year. So in January and February, when you put your real numbers, your tax return will be prepared based on real numbers. But now, because the year hasn't ended yet, you can just put your estimates, and we will get back to you with your estimated tax balance or tax refund. And that will allow you to be prepared for the next season, for the tax season. Because sometimes we see, for example, oh, I have a tax balance I didn't know, and now I have 2 weeks to pay it. It's a little bit, tight deadline. Or, oh, I have a tax refund. I didn't know this. If I knew, I would have filed earlier. So filling out that form, letting us know your estimates is going to allow you to know your tax balance or refund estimated numbers in advance. And you can also ask any questions you have about, maybe you have a new situation this year, maybe something has changed. So that's what this page allows you to do, those two things. Deduct the expense in the same year, and if you prefer, get your estimates beforehand. Yeah, Simon, actually, yeah, that's right. You filed with us. So you paid us during tax filing, you can deduct that expense. But if you pay us for 2023 tax filing in 2024, you'll have to wait 1 year for that. So if you make that payment before the year ends, now you can deduct 2 payments. It's a higher deduction. Completely up to you. Both are completely fine. But if you just want to get that deduction in the same year, that's recommended. Laura has a question, and then let's take one more question and then wrap up this session. I switched from a working holiday visa to a tourist visa, to a working visa in July. Do I only file from July to December? Because this question involves visa, I'm not exactly sure, but filing taxes doesn't depend on the type of visa you have, Laura. Just like Sunny is showing, if you're in non-permanent resident category, meaning you lived a full year in Japan, but in total you have been living here for less than 5 years, then you're non-permanent resident, and your domestic income should be on your tax return. There's no section on the tax return where we say, oh, Laura has a working visa or a tourist visa, a working holiday visa. We just report the income. But to figure out what income should be reported, just take a look at these categories and find out if you may be non-resident if you haven't lived a full year. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, everyone. I don't see any more questions, so I think we will wrap up here. But please feel free to send any follow-up questions. My email is oguz@freedomtax.jp. You can also email us at info@freedomtax.jp. And our website is freedomtax.jp. Again, if you have any questions or during tax season, we will be happy to see you. And thank you so much, everybody, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. It was great. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Follow us on social media.
Yeah.